Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just hit that notification button to be notified about our next show. You are live with Get Connected. Mike Agerbo here with my good nerdy friends, John Biehler and Graham Williams. We've got an awesome program for you today. Later on, we'll be chatting about Amazon. Are they getting too big? Do they have too much power? Is there censorship afoot? Well, we'll be talking with a bookstore owner down in Kansas about one of his publications that might have been censored by Amazon by being critical of them. And we'll get some information on that. Talk about biting the hand that feeds you. We will also be talking about ransomware and phishing attacks. There's so many of us working from home now. You have to be super careful because cyber criminals have increased their attacks on people working from home and businesses. So we're going to talk about some tips that you can use to help prevent you becoming a victim of that. Let's talk about some of the news, guys. I guess the big thing this week would be Apple. They had their big Worldwide Developers Conference. So we'll be going through that in detail on tomorrow's sister show called The App Show. It's on Sundays on the Chorus Radio Network, and here in Vancouver on CKW 980. Goes from 10 to 11 a.m. So if you want to find out in-depth coverage of that, make sure you stay tuned for it. Or you can always visit our website at getconnectedmedia.com. We've written a ton of articles and got some video up there as well to give you the lowdown on it. Some of the highlights for me, guys, would be Apple getting into making their own processors now, competing directly against Intel. So in the future, and pretty quickly here by the end of the year, Apple will be using their own Apple Silicon chips instead of Intel chips in their MacBooks and their iMacs. Big surprise?
I don't think so. I mean, again, it's something they've been working on for quite some time. The big one for me, though, was actually the name of it, Apple Silicon, which we have to distinguish from Apple Silicone, which is something you would use to seal your bathroom. Two very different things. So Apple Silicon, but I mean, this was the roadmap, right? We've been talking about it for years. These processors are getting faster, more power efficient. Not surprised.
They've updated all of their different operating systems as well. And, you know, like I was saying, part of the move of doing their own chips for their laptop and their computer line is that it aligns everything together. So now they'll be using the same Apple hardware technology in your iPhone, iPads, and also Apple TV, and now their computer systems. So it's going to make it easy for developers to create apps basically once that'll work across all those different platforms. No big hardware announcements other than the Apple Silicon, but lots of updates to the different operating systems. You know, on the watch, your Apple Watch will now tell you how long you need to wash your hands for. Big changes coming for iPhone users and how you use your home screen. You know, if you're used to scrolling through screen after screen of apps trying to find the one you want, that is going to change dramatically. If you want to find out more about that, visit our website, getconnectedmedia.com, or tune in to the App Show tomorrow, and we will give you the step-by-step of how that's all going to work. On to some other news, guys. Microsoft. And I don't know if a lot of listeners would know about this, but they had a service called Mixer that competed against Amazon's Twitch, which is, I think, you know, used by a lot of video game enthusiasts to stream their gameplay. So Microsoft had Mixer, and again, most people probably haven't heard of it, but it's now shutting down. John, explain what's going on with that.
Yeah, so Mixer is something that was basically built into your Xbox. It gives you the ability to play your video games, and by pressing one button, you can actually broadcast that gameplay to somebody else that they can use a web browser, an Xbox, or even a smartphone or tablet to watch that person playing the game. This is incredibly popular, especially with kids. Even myself, when a new game comes out, I like seeing how other people are playing it, get some ideas, some tips and tricks and that kind of thing. And also these platforms sort of develop personalities as well. So you tend to follow people that you like hearing about, kind of like people listening to our radio show, for example. They like listening to Mike's soothing sounds. Same thing on Twitch or Mixer. Those platforms are really made for personalities that have an interesting take on a specific game or a variety of games. And we talked, I think, even last week about the fact that in May, 8 million hours of people playing chess was streamed on Twitch. So, but anyways, Mixer is shutting down, and it was basically part of a deal with Facebook. So Facebook is going big and hard in the gaming streaming service as well, and so this was the part of that play. Unfortunately, I don't know if it was related or not. There was also some concerns with some of the senior management at Mixer about some racism concerns that would have come to light just over the past week, and also there was even some issues with some sexual assaults on some of the streamers that were targeted by people in various parts of the streaming community. So it was a really tumultuous weekend and week for the streaming services across the board, because then all these streamers are now sort of left, am I going to go to Facebook? Am I going to go to Twitch? Am I going to go to Starbucks and be a barista? Like, they don't know, and everyone's kind of in shock still. So it's kind of a sad thing, though, because I actually quite liked Mixer. It was a much smaller service than Twitch, but it was a pretty well put together system and service that I quite enjoyed.
They paid a lot of money for some of those streamers, right? Basically like signing a sports star. There's one guy named Ninja, it was 7 figures for that deal. The interesting thing, the telling thing, and this is why I think Facebook's got such an uphill battle for them here. They released all of these guys from their contracts, fully paid them out in some cases. And they were given the option to go to Facebook, and all of them said, no.
Correct.
Not interested. I will say this one thing. And when it comes to Microsoft, if the shutdown of this did have to do with eradicating racism, sort of a kill it with fire approach, I'm proud of them for it. They really, it's time that we put a stop to that in the tech industry. And so seeing them stomp that out, if that's exactly what they did, you know what? Bravo.
Agreed.
Let's look at some of the other tech news. SpaceX applies for a telecom license in Canada ahead of their Starlink internet debut. So this is something that we've covered on the show before. SpaceX has been launching dozens of satellites into low Earth orbit to provide high-speed internet to rural areas and eventually the world. So they have actually applied for a license here in Canada with the CRTC. And in addition, they are looking for some initial testers of the service in rural parts of the country. So you can actually Google this online, and there's a website where you can actually enter your name if you are, I guess, in the northern latitudes where they're basically targeting right now. So this is going to be pretty interesting. From what I understand, it's going to be high-speed internet with pretty decent low latency as well. So it's going to be quick when you're, clicking on web pages. It'll be interesting to see if that can be competition to some of the internet providers we have now.
My parents live right between Cambridge and Brantford, and it's not a large distance between the two cities, but they are stuck with mobile internet right now, which anytime it rains, they get disconnected. I will say this about this, though. This does sound a lot like the plot to Kingsman, right? The movie, right? Like eccentric billionaire launches worldwide mobile internet service that basically causes it. Let's keep an eye on Elon. I'm just saying. He's
Samuel
like
Jackson.
He's like this far from supervillain. I love the guy, but I'm worried.
You know what I'm interested in? So what if the CRTC really, restricts them on, how much they can charge, or if they can even operate here in Canada at all? Like, what's to stop them from operating here? Like, all you need is a receiver on your house or your building to get that signal. Well,
they did basically have people like going around with trucks trying to track down people who had hacked satellite dishes at one point. Maybe we'll bring back the satellite squad. It'll be great. You there, pirated signal. Get out of here.
Okay, we are going to have to take a break, but we've got a really great show today. We're going to be talking about Amazon. Some people think it's getting too big. They've got their hands in too many things and controlling too much. If you remember, they started off in the book space. They're the number one bookseller in the world now, whether it's hardcover or even ebooks. And we're going to be talking with a gentleman who claims that Amazon censored one of his publications that he was selling through their site. It's a fascinating story. You're listening to Get Connected here on the Chorus Radio Network. Back after this. You are back with Get Connected. Mike Agerbo here with John Biehler. We have a really interesting segment here now. We're going to talk about Amazon and censorship. On the line, we've got a great guest. His name is Danny Caine. He is the owner of the Raven Bookstore down in Kansas. He has also published a zine, How to Resist Amazon and Why. And I wanted to bring Danny on because there was an interesting little exchange that happened about a week or two ago. Elon Musk basically tweeted out that it's time to break up Amazon. Monopolies are wrong. And this stemmed from an issue that an author of a COVID-19 book, controversial author. He basically is a former New York Times reporter who's been questioning the severity of COVID-19. Might not agree with his thoughts on it, but again, you have to be careful of censorship. He was basically, I guess, blocked in some form on Amazon for his book. And there was a New York Times article written about that. And in that article, our guest, Danny, was quoted. Thanks again for joining us, Danny.
Of course. I'm happy to be here.
So there's a lot going on. And for the listeners, Amazon rose to prominence for being the biggest online bookstore. They've obviously ventured out into everything else. I think I just got a delivery of dish soap yesterday, but they have come a long way from books. Let's talk about the censorship. Like, what was the fallout from your quote in the New York Times when it comes to like your bookstore and also your zine? And maybe just tell listeners what a zine is.
Yeah, well, a zine is basically a pamphlet. It's an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper folded in half and stapled down. It's just a super cheap way to self-publish or disseminate whatever you want to talk about. So as I sat down to kind of compile some anti-Amazon advocacy I had been doing online, the zine was the quickest way and cheapest way to get it out. I didn't want to put that many barriers to accessing this. And so mainly we sold it for $3 from our front counter at the store, just hundreds and hundreds of them. And that's the point of zines. They're easy to reproduce and they're quick. Eventually Microcosm Publishing out of Portland, Oregon, stepped in to help me publish and distribute it because the demand got way too high for me and my wife and my friends to be stapling these every night at home. So,
I mean, you're literally printing these out and stapling them yourself.
Right. Just spending hours at the self-copy store. So they helped, and that's the version that ended up on Amazon. And because it's traditionally published through a publisher, it winds up on Amazon. And Microcosm, they don't sell directly to Amazon, but they sell to people who do sell to Amazon. So it eventually wound up on Amazon. But the day the article about Amazon censorship appeared, I just checked the Amazon site for fun, and I noticed that Amazon had stopped selling it direct. You could no longer get it Prime. You could no longer get it direct from Amazon warehouses. It was only available from secondary sellers at inflated prices, which is often what happens when Amazon decides not to sell something direct. It hits the secondary sellers and the price really inflates. Again, I don't know if that's a direct a response to the article, if they were throttling my sales on purpose, if it was something else. But that's kind of my point, is that Amazon is really secretive about this stuff. And seemingly kind of arbitrary about deciding what they carry and what they don't. And that has a lot of ramifications that I'm certainly happy to talk about.
It seems like a pretty big coincidence that would happen on the same day, don't you think?
Well, I do. And it's the reporter David Streitfeld certainly thought it seemed fishy. Again, it's hard to tell. I don't want to make any unfair accusations, but the timing seemed to be pretty right there. And it's, even if it didn't happen to me, it's absolutely possible for Amazon to do that. If an author is critical of Amazon, they can 100% stop selling that author's book. And the problem, of course, any private business is allowed to decide what they sell and what they don't. I pride myself on the Raven's curation of books. I try really hard to make sure that all the books we have on our shelves are important or interesting or represent our store well. That's well within the rights of a private business. But I think when you get to a business of Amazon's size, the private business argument falls apart, because Amazon is absolutely a monopoly in the book selling world. And their impact on the industry is so outsized that it goes beyond just a private business deciding not to stock a book. Amazon accounts for half of all book sales in the United States and 75% of online book sales. And so their decisions not to stock a book are way more far-reaching than mine as the owner of a 1,200 square foot bookstore in Lawrence, Kansas.
Do you sell books online from your Raven bookstore through Amazon?
No.
No.
In part because we don't sell used books, and that's a lot of bookstores that get into selling on Amazon are selling used stock. We don't do that. Even if we did, I wouldn't sell through Amazon.
So what is your recourse then? You know, your zine, and again, it's called How to Resist Amazon and Why. Very topical.
Which I just love the fact that it's available or was available on Amazon.
Yeah, it might still be. I haven't checked it in a while. But right.
So what is your recourse? Like, who do you phone at Amazon to check in on why that happened?
It's notoriously difficult to get anyone on the phone at Amazon. I know I would rely on my publishers for that because they're the ones. But then again, my publisher doesn't deal directly with Amazon. They don't as a political statement, as a protest, they don't sell directly to Amazon. But my Joe Beal, who runs Microcosm out of Portland, has expressed frustration before about how difficult it is to get in touch with them. And I think they make it difficult on purpose just to maintain that control.
Were you getting many sales through Amazon for your zine?
I don't think so. I mean, probably not. We were getting a ton of Microcosm was getting a ton of sales through their website. We sell a lot through our website. I don't imagine, and initially I was like, I don't want any of my books to be sold on Amazon. But then it's like, you kind of think about preaching to the choir, and it's kind of funny to me to think about someone on Amazon finding this book and ordering it through Amazon, because that's maybe the target audience we need to reach. Because the people who are buying from indie bookstores already, it's like, I don't want to preach to the choir. That being said, Amazon is so good at manipulating their search algorithm that if they don't want something to pop up, it won't. So the odds of you finding something, you can't even browse on Amazon. It's not a site that's browsable. But the odds of someone happening upon my zine on Amazon without looking for it directly, I think, are pretty low.
It's interesting. I just looked it up on Amazon.ca, the Canadian version, and I can actually get it Prime delivered by Saturday. Your zine.
There you go.
Yeah, for $5 Canadian.
Okay,
you'll be huge in Canada now.
We had a couple bookstores. I know Glass Bookstore. I forgot where they are in Canada, but they ordered it right away. They ordered the self-published batch at the very beginning, and we've sold to a couple stores in Toronto too. So it's already making its way up there. I'm glad to hear that.
So I mean, it's an interesting topic, Danny. I mean, if someone came out with a book that says Danny Caine sucks because he hates beagles and small children, you as your bookstore owner have the right not to pick up that book, right?
Of course.
Yeah. But I guess to your point, Amazon does basically control most of the book market at this point. And that's not going to change anytime soon.
Well, folks like me are working to change that as soon as possible. But that's just the thing is they would argue that we're a private business. We can sell whatever they want. Okay, fine. But they are getting into publishing. They're publishing their own books. The way books are designed now is changing because of Amazon, and thinking about looking good on computer screens is very important to book cover designers. And so they really do have an influence on a lot of publishing. And to be completely divorced of free speech is wishful thinking, I think, for Amazon. And they absolutely do have just a tremendously outsized effect on what gets published and why. And so their decision not to carry a book, though they technically, by the interpretation of American law, have the right to do that, I don't think we can ignore the free speech implications of them deciding not to sell a book.
What would you recommend to tackle this issue? Because it is an issue. Like, that's a lot of power in one company's hands.
I absolutely recommend the American antitrust law needs to be rethought. In the 70s, there was a shift in the interpretation of antitrust law that says the only measure for whether a company is too big is prices. The only measure of consumer benefit is whether that company is offering lower prices or not. And at this point, Amazon is still the cheapest place to get it. And that interpretation of consumer welfare ignores how Amazon decimates local economies. It ignores how dangerous those jobs are. It ignores just everything that's dangerous, Amazon's impact on the environment. Amazon is clearly a harmful company, but if you look at how antitrust law, Amazon is a harmful company based on their size. But if you look at how we've been interpreting antitrust law in the United States for the last 40 years, the only way we measure it is by low prices. And so antitrust enforcers are running into a brick wall that's like, well, it's the cheapest place to get stuff, and that's good for consumers. But I think there is some growing momentum at using a government approach to look at Amazon's size. I mean, Jeff Bezos just yesterday indicated that he was willing to testify before the U.S. House of Representatives, which is a really important step. He'll be on the record in a public hearing talking about just these issues and his anti-competitive practices that stem from the size of his company. And so there is growing pressure from governments in the United States, governments in Europe, to look at it. But I think government is the only solution, because unchecked, Amazon will just keep growing and growing and growing.
I think something else that's worth mentioning too, that we talked about before the interview, was the fact that especially right now during the pandemic, we've heard over and over again, support your local businesses and things like that. And that's definitely one way to, shift the forces, if you will. And even your own bookstore has been doing quite well in this situation. You're not even open for browsing. You're just doing online sales and drop-offs, I think you said. And
right.
that's I think for me, that's a good testament that the power of having an independent local store that you can support is always the first place a consumer should look, instead of Amazon. I know Mike and I talk about Amazon all the time and how easy it is, but it's also easy to overlook a smaller retailer like yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, I would say that it's a funny thing has happened in the book industry because of the pandemic. And in late March, Amazon decided to quote unquote deprioritize books. And they were so inundated with orders for face masks and toilet paper or whatever. They stopped accepting orders of books, and they stopped shipping out books at prime speeds. And waiting time for books from Amazon was all of a sudden 4-6 weeks. And so I think at the Raven, and I think at other bookstores that were ready to take this leap, we saw it as an opportunity to snag some market share back. Because, a book that would take 4 weeks from Amazon, if it was in stock, we could deliver it in Lawrence that day within hours. And so we took a really aggressive approach in developing our shipping and delivery infrastructure as a way to kind of pull some of those customers into our orbit and hopefully try to retain them. And that's what we're working on now, is figuring out how to hang on to those people that came to us when Amazon stopped selling books. But the ease is tricky. It really is an easy thing to do, to click and have something delivered in 2 days. But I would argue that's a sale that's not going to something downtown in your town. It's making it that much harder for whatever retail store is close to you to keep providing local jobs and keep pumping money into the local economy. And Amazon, one of their greatest tricks, I think, has been to convince everybody that it's normal to order something and have it arrive 1 to 2 days later. That's a tremendous logistical feat. It takes a huge shipping infrastructure. Shipping that many small packages that fast is catastrophic for the environment in trucks, in vehicles, just the emissions alone. But it's so easy and it's so cheap, and they really lose money on shipping, but it's to snag people into their orbit. So yeah, I would just say we try to educate people on what it means that something arrives that fast. I mean, though it's easy, it's kind of dangerous in other ways too.
We're talking with Danny Caine. He is the owner of the Raven Bookstore down in Lawrence, Kansas, and also a author of a zine called How to Resist Amazon and Why. Available on Amazon.ca. Ironically.
It's also available at ravenbookstore.com, and we do ship to Canada.
Oh, very good. Well, maybe that would be a good choice. The web address again, Dean?
ravenbookstore.com.
Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thanks for having me.
When we come back from the break, more tech to talk here on Get Connected. Stay tuned. You're back with the program. Want to talk about security now. A lot of us have changed our working habits, especially during COVID-19. Many of us working from home. Many businesses have had to adjust. And we still need to be concerned about security. We've got a great guest on right now. We're going to talk about ransomware and ransomware attacks. We've got Katherine Keefe. She's the Privacy Breach Response Focus Group Lead at Beazley Breach Response Services. Thanks for joining us.
I'm pleased to be here, Mike. How are you?
I'm great. Interesting stats from a report you guys have put out. It looks like ransomware attacks are up, and specifically around companies that offer things like professional services, also financial institutions, and healthcare. Let's start off just educating our listeners again about what ransomware is, if you can give a layman's term of that.
Sure, Mike. Ransomware is malware, essentially, that criminals use to encrypt data illegally. So, in other words, if you click on an email that you think is from your boss, but it's a spoofed email, and it's really coming from a criminal, and you click on the link or follow the directions that are included in the email, that can inadvertently, you don't mean to do this, but that can inadvertently let a criminal into your company's computer systems, whereupon the criminals will sit and lurk and watch the traffic, watch who's talking about financial transactions, figure out who the money people are in the company, and then threaten a ransom demand and say, hey, we've locked up your systems, pay us 6 Bitcoin, and we'll think about decrypting your data. That's a ransomware attack.
So basically holding your company's computer and data hostage until you pay that ransom. And when the companies do pay that ransom, do they get their data and computers unlocked?
Well, it's a mixed bag. Some attack groups are more quote-unquote honorable than others, if there is indeed honor among thieves. Some are set up to be quote-unquote legitimate businesses, and they strive to provide the best customer service, and they try very hard to enable the decryption of your data once they are paid, because they realize if word gets out that they're taking money and not delivering the goods, then people are going to stop paying. So there are groups that, once the ransom is paid, will very ably provide the decryption key, and the company can begin to decrypt the data. It is not a turn the light switch proposition. However, I think companies operate under a misconception that paying a ransom and getting the decryptor key back means they can automatically restore their data. Sometimes these restoration projects take days, weeks, or months.
Obviously, this kind of attack is crippling for a business. If you can't access your computer systems and your data, I think in today's time, you're basically dead in the water. Can you explain, though, why some industries, as I'd mentioned at the top of the interview, like financial services and healthcare, manufacturing, are targeted by these cyber criminals more than others?
I think it's for the very reason you just said, Mike, that the criminals realize that without their data, certain industry segments are unable to run their businesses, and so therefore may be more inclined to pay the ransom. So when you think about healthcare, you think about patient care and attacks on hospital systems, electronic medical records. If a hospital can't provide that care because it can't schedule the surgeries or operate the NICU security systems, these are things that we've seen happen, then, consideration of paying ransom is more top of mind. Similarly, for professional services companies who really, such as like law firms or accounting firms who hold the data of their customers, they're desperate to get that data back because otherwise their credibility will go down the tubes and likely lose that business. In the manufacturing sector, it's about keeping those operations going. And a lot of systems and lines are run electronically. And without the ability to run those electronic systems again, business is lost, and there's the potential for actually going out of business.
We're talking with
the criminals are reading the room.
We're talking with Katherine Keefe. She is with Beazley. They are a breach response services company looking into things like ransomware. Why do you think ransomware attacks are up now compared to the same time last year?
Well, I think for a couple of reasons. I think it's a crime that does pay. The criminals are having some success with this. Even though more and more companies are focusing on their backup and their abilities and testing their abilities to restore data from their own backups, that's kind of rule number one. But in the instance where that's not possible or not viable, companies are paying the ransom, and criminals are, capitalizing on this. And so I think the success of the crime sort of fosters more of it. The other aspect that we saw in the increase in ransomware is that the criminals are looking for aggregated opportunities. In other words, they're attacking vendors who support other organizations by supporting their IT systems or by providing accounting software or other business services. And these vendor attacks have downstream impacts on the impacted clients, oftentimes resulting in the downstream client systems getting encrypted or some other type of impact, such as a system outage. So criminals realize that by attacking a vendor, they can leverage that attack in the hopes that the vendor will be more inclined to pay the ransom because of the outsized impact on the customer base.
Let's talk about small businesses, even more specifically here. For small business owners, I think more and more of them are hosting their business online, from, like you said, accounting data to their email, customer information. How can they lower their cyber risks? I mean, typically small businesses don't have, a dedicated IT services team, computer managers to look after this. They're kind of leaving everything in the hands of the cloud providers that they're using, whether that's like Microsoft Office 365 or some of these cloud accounting packages. What can they do to mitigate their risk?
I think they can talk to their cloud provider or their cloud provider representative about the security measures that often come with those Office 365 packages. That sometimes are not fully deployed. So in many circumstances, Office 365 will come with it some security functionality that sometimes companies forget to turn on. Office 365 has multi-factor authentication capabilities and functionality that companies should inquire about and turn on that functionality to better secure the systems. Or any vendor that a company uses to outsource any business function using data or performing data functions, small business owners should be asking questions around the data security aspects of that contract, and maybe even hiring a lawyer to take a look at those contracts to make sure that there are security provisions in place. Small businesses can also go a long way by training their people as to how to detect a phishing email and not to respond to it, because phishing emails are one of the largest vectors, threat vectors where the attacks enter the system. So if we can get our colleagues and friends at work to not take the bait and click on that phishing email, you can prevent a lot of these attacks through just a little bit of education.
What are some examples of these phishing emails that they should look out for?
Well, there'll be emails that are directed maybe to the financial department, the accounts payable department, that will ask to change a wire routing number or direct payments to a new recipient. There's a lot of financial fraud that happens that way, where people get spoofed emails and are directed to move money in a way that hadn't been the case before. And what can be done about that is that you can require, in those circumstances, in the company, should that happen, that you put your pen down or take your fingers off the keyboard pick up the phone and call your boss and say, hey, did you really mean for me to do this? And use a moment of common sense to question whether that's a legitimate request or not.
Finally, for a lot of us who are working from home now, I think obviously we still have to be aware of a lot of the risks. Do you have any tips for people that are working remotely?
Well, I think to make sure that you're following all of your company's protocols with respect to, not mingling your business work with your personal work. A lot of companies, require access through a VPN to access corporate systems. And I think most companies probably did as best they could under, tight circumstances and short timelines to move their workforce into virtual settings. But sometimes that basic security is forgotten. And we've told our employees if they have any questions to go link back to the IT security department and ask those questions about the security of their home networks and, to what extent can, for example, things be sent to a home printer, which sometimes printers get compromised. So it's a matter of sort of following the company guidelines on what is or is not permissible in the home setting.
We've been talking with Katherine Keefe. She is with Beazley Breach Response Services. She's a privacy breach response focus group lead. Katherine, if people want to find out more about the study you guys did and more about ransomware and the risks there, where can they get more info?
Sure, Mike. They can come on to our website, Beazley.com. We are a specialty lines insurance carrier specializing in cyber insurance, and offer our breach response product where we provide a host of services to our policyholders to help them prevent breaches and help them through a situation should they have a ransomware attack or a breach.
Thanks again for joining us today, Katherine.
Thanks, Mike.
When we come back from the break, more tech to talk. Stay tuned. Just a little bit of time left. John, we've been talking a little bit about Apple today and some of their big announcements. We're going to cover them in detail on tomorrow's Get Connected app show here on CKNW 980 and across the Course Radio Network, talking about all the big changes coming to your iPhone and your watch. But one thing, John, that we should probably mention is that you can actually try out some of this stuff now.
Kind of. Yeah. If you're an Apple developer, which basically requires you paying a membership, you can get this stuff now. That's how I did it. I have developed apps in the past, and I keep that going just because I like trying out the new stuff. But Apple normally has a public beta period that allows the public to sort of try stuff out, give their feedback on their forums, that kind of thing. And that's going to be available in July. And this is the first time they're actually going to have a public beta for the Apple Watch, which is very cool too.
I jump out of planes, I go scuba diving, I juggle fire. I don't do dangerous things like installing beta software, but this time I might.
Oh, you're tempted, aren't you?
I am a little bit.
So if you want to try some of the stuff now, you can get into the development program. You've got to pay a bit of a fee there. But if you want to try it for free before it gets released in the fall, you have to wait a little bit till July. I want to throw to our contest now. We're giving away a Belkin Accessory prize pack. I want to thank the folks at Belkin for offering that up to us. Includes an iPhone cable. They're kind of like gold. Also a Wemo, I guess a smart plug. You can plug things into lamps and use your voice or your smartphone to control that. And a Belkin wireless charger for your smartphone. It's actually able to charge 2 devices at the same time. You want to try to win it? Just go to our website, getconnectedmedia.com, visit the newsletter tab, and subscribe to win. And you'll be entered into all the contests. You can't lose. Also, don't forget to hit our YouTube channel, the Get Connected YouTube channel. Just do a search for that on YouTube and subscribe to it. We need your help. We want to build it up because it helps us make even more and more videos. And don't forget to like all the ones that you enjoyed watching and give some comments as well. We'd like to hear some feedback from you. I want to thank everyone that helps put the show together and my 2 co-hosts, John and Graham, and our producer, Christina. We'll see you again next time.